Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Golden Bachelorette. I've changed my mind. I don't think it's Chapple's fault Joan Vassos doesn't see her family. I no longer think that it's the Golden Bachelorette winner Chapple's fault. Season 1 lead Joan Vassos isn't seeing her family enough. Chock beat out 23 other golden men to win 62-year-old school administrator Joan's heart. He received Joan's first one-on-one date, where she whisked him away to Disneyland for the day before sharing an intimate dinner where they got to know each other on a deeper level. Joan was smitten with Chock all season long and was devastated when Chock's mother passed away during filming, and he had to leave the experience. However, Chock returned a few days later and continued to woo Joan. Joan took Chock, Guy Gansard, and Pascal Adby on the final dates in Tahiti. After Pascal self-eliminated, Joan let Guy know that Chock had her heart. Chock proposed to Joan during the final rose ceremony, and the pair have been stepping out as an engaged couple ever since. Within their newly engaged life, Joan has been spending a lot of time away from her family, and many have blamed Chock for it. But I don't think it's his fault anymore. Bachelor Nation's Chock did not win a lot of golden fans during his pursuit of Joan. Chock was an aggressive contestant and showcased his interest in Joan at every turn, leaving the other contestants upset at his seeming smothering of Joan. During a group bowling date, Chock had his arm around Joan most of the time and wouldn't let the other men have a chance to talk to her. Post-show, Pascal called Chock a stalker for his behavior during that date and during the competition. However, I think Chock was just certain about wanting to be with Joan. I can't fault him for showcasing his love in ways that caught Joan's attention more than the others. I don't believe Chock had any malice towards the other men, and since he won Joan's heart, his strategy worked for him. I do see that his actions caused him to lose fans and develop a negative reputation. Moreover, Chock divorced his first wife and never married his second fiancée of 9 years, which I know was seen as a red flag. I can see how fans would think Chock's relationship history makes him look flighty, but it did all lead him to Joan, so I feel the backlash about Chock is unwarranted. Joan firmly stated before she started the Golden Bachelorette experience that she would always put her family first, and that she didn't want to move away from her family. But Joan is doing just that. Joan and Chock revealed their plans to play out their relationship between Joan's native Maryland, Chock's native Kansas, and hopefully obtain a shared home in New York City. But it isn't panning out that way, and many fans feel Chock is causing Joan to leave her family behind, but I don't see it that way. I do admit that Joan has been sacrificing to be with Chock, but it's been her own prerogative. She has finally found love in her sunset years, and I see her taking the initiative to make her relationship work, even if it means spending less time around her loved ones. Joan and Chock recently went to Cancun, Mexico, where they enjoyed themselves without the presence of their families. I'm certain they need that time to develop their relationship, and I don't see Chock as being the only driver in that narrative. I used to think Chock was overbearing and potentially aiming to isolate Joan post-show, given his actions on the Golden Bachelorette. But I now see Joan as the catalyst for how her love story with Chock will go. I don't think Chock is encouraging Joan to spend more time with him and less with her family. I just think that's how their early relationship is taking shape. I feel they haven't had enough time to work out their engaged life with the inclusion of both of their families, and time will tell if they can manage that aspect better. In all the interviews and Instagram posts I've seen of Joan and Chock, I see that Chock is doing his best to support Joan while trying to navigate their blended lives together. I think he's misunderstood from his time on the Golden Bachelorette, and he's not getting enough credit for his genuine love and respect for Joan, how they're handling their relationship challenges, or his effort to add both their families to the mix. I believe time will vindicate Chock, and he and Joan will settle their schedules and be able to incorporate their families better. For weeks, I was convinced that Chapple had been the wedge driving Joan Vassos further from her family. After all, the timing seemed too perfect or too damning depending on how you look at it. Joan, the leading lady of Asterisk, the Golden Bachelorette Asterisk, a woman who spoke often about the deep bond she shared with her children and grandchildren, suddenly seemed distant from them. And who was by her side? Chock Chapple, the charming, unconventional contestant whose spontaneity had both delighted and unnerved her. It had to be him, right? But I changed my mind. I don't think it's Chock's fault at all. In fact, I think Chock might be getting a raw deal here. And if we really examine the situation, Joan's apparent separation from her family has far less to do with the man in her life and far more to do with the life she's chosen to lead. Let's rewind a bit. When Joan first stepped into the Asterisk Golden Bachelorette Asterisk spotlight, she wasn't just any contestant plucked from obscurity. She was already a beloved member of Asterisk Golden Bachelor Asterisk history. Fans fell in love with her during Jerry Turner's season, only to have their hearts broken when she left the show early for family reasons. At the time, Joan embodied the self-sacrificing matriarch. She put her family above romance, above her own happiness. That kind of devotion doesn't just disappear overnight. So when Joan returned for her own season, the expectation was clear. She would balance love and family, the two most important things in her life. But reality television is never that simple. The Asterisk Golden Bachelorette Asterisk environment is designed to be all-consuming, cutting contestants off from their regular support systems, immersing them in a world where the stakes feel impossibly high. Joan was not immune to this. The deeper she waded into her journey for love, the more distance naturally formed between her and her family. And then there's Chock. Chock, with his cowboy charm, his penchant for living in the moment, and his philosophy that life is meant to be experienced, not meticulously planned. From the beginning, he represented something different for Joan, something exciting and maybe even a little rebellious. He wasn't the safe, predictable choice. He wasn't the kind of man who would fold seamlessly into her well-structured, family-oriented life. That, I think, is why people blame him. It's easy to assume that Joan's growing independence must be the result of some outside influence, that Chock swooped in, filled her head with grand ideas of adventure, and convinced her to prioritize romance over responsibility. But that theory does Joan a great disservice. Joan Vassos is not a woman who is easily swayed. This is a woman who walked away from a shot at love once before because her family needed her. This is a woman who has spent decades making choices that prioritize others over herself. If Joan is now choosing differently, if she is, even temporarily, stepping back from her family to explore love and personal fulfillment, that is her asterisk decision. Not Chock's. Not anyone else's. And maybe that's the real issue. Maybe it's not that Chock has taken Joan away from her family, but that Joan is finally making a choice for herself. A choice that doesn't center around being a mother or a grandmother, but simply being a woman with desires and dreams of her own. That's a hard shift for any family to process, especially when they're used to being the priority. The reality is, this tension was bound to happen no matter who Joan ended up with. Whether it was Chock, another contestant, or even if she had found love outside the Golden Bachelorette bubble, the result would have been the same. At some point, Joan was going to have to redefine her role, not just as a matriarch, but as an individual. That's a journey that has little to do with the man by her side and everything to do with her own growth. Does this mean Joan will always be distant from her family? Of course not. Family ties have a way of stretching without breaking. But right now, she's in a period of transition. She's learning what it means to be Joan first and a mother and grandmother second. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe Joan's family, rather than seeing this as a loss, should see it as a sign of her finally stepping into a life that fulfills her asterisk. Chock Chapple didn't take Joan away. Joan made a choice to explore what life could be beyond the expectations that had shaped her for so long. And whether she ends up with Chock or not, that's a journey worth taking.